The cold wind whipped across the empty streets of Harlow Town, carrying the faint scent of gasoline and city grit. Inside a modest suburban home, Lila, a newborn, lay in her crib, her tiny face scrunched in confusion and instinctive cries that fell silent almost immediately. Her parents, Mason, a Hell's Angel known for his fierce loyalty, and Clara, a quiet, strong-willed woman, stared in disbelief. She can't hear," Clara whispered, voice breaking, as Mason's jaw tightened, knuckles white against the crib's railing. Mason's eyes, usually a storm of control and authority, softened with helplessness. "No, it can't be. Not my little girl." His voice trembled with a mix of fear, anger, and heartbreak. The house, normally filled with the low hum of motorcycles and laughter, was now silent, heavy with tension. Days passed, doctors confirmed their fears, and every attempt to reach her through sound ended in frustration. Mason, a man who had faced violence, betrayal, and danger without flinching, now felt powerless. The roar of engines, the loyalty of his crew, and his reputation meant nothing in the face of something he couldn't fix. One evening, Mason took a rare walk through the town streets, gripping his leather jacket as if it could shield him from despair. That's when he noticed Toby, a young homeless boy, scavenging near a dumpster. Something about him caught Mason's eye. Maybe it was the intense focus, or the tiny glint of mischief in his eyes despite his grim surroundings. Toby looked up as Mason approached, holding a small, intricately carved whistle. "Looking for something to make her hear," he said, voice quiet but oddly confident. Mason blinked, unsure whether to be angry, skeptical, or desperate enough to hope. Toby continued, holding the whistle out. "It's not magic. But it might just do what everyone else says can't be done." Mason's brow furrowed. "Who are you, kid? And what makes you think?" Toby interrupted, smile teasing but calm. "I see things. I hear things you don't. And I know how to make people notice what's real." Mason looked at the small whistle, at the homeless boy, and at his daughter sleeping quietly in her crib, unaware of the storm around her. For the first time in days, a spark of hope flickered. It was unbelievable, improbable, and yet, something in Toby's eyes made Mason feel he had no choice but to follow this boy's lead. And as Toby led Mason down the empty streets toward a distant, flickering alley, the world outside seemed to hold its breath. This was the moment when despair met the impossible, and a father's loyalty would be tested in ways he could never have imagined. Toby led Mason through narrow alleys, past rusted dumpsters and graffiti-scarred walls, his small frame moving with an almost uncanny confidence. Mason's heart pounded, not from the walk, but from the mixture of hope and fear gnawing at him. Could a homeless kid really hold the key to his daughter's silence? Finally, they stopped in front of an old, abandoned garage. Toby pulled a small cloth from his jacket and carefully unwrapped the whistle. The craftsmanship was intricate, delicate, almost magical in its detail. "It's special," Toby said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It listens to what's missing and tells it back. You ready to see?" Mason's jaw tightened. I don't even know if I believe in this." Toby smiled faintly. "Belief isn't required. Action is." Back in the house, Clara was pacing, worry etched deep in every line of her face. She glanced at Lila in her crib, still silent, still unreachable. The moment Mason returned, carrying Toby and the strange whistle, she froze. What is that?" Toby stepped forward, kneeling beside the crib. "I need her attention. Just watch." He placed the whistle near Lila's tiny lips and blew softly. The sound that emerged wasn't loud or harsh, it was clear, melodic, resonating in a way that seemed to vibrate through the room itself. Lila's tiny fingers twitched, her eyes widened. Then, almost imperceptibly, she turned her head toward the sound. Mason's voice caught. "Did she?" Clara's eyes welled with tears. She's looking, she's reacting." Toby smiled, a quiet, triumphant curve of his lips. "She hears me. She's been waiting for something precise, something she can feel, not just sound. That's the trick." Mason gently lifted Lila, holding her close. Her small eyes locked onto the whistle, and then, amazingly, she cooed, a sound that was faint, but unmistakable. For the first time, her world had filled with the possibility of connection. Tears streamed down Mason's face as he looked at Toby. How did you? Toby shrugged, simple and unassuming. Some things aren't about magic. They're about noticing what's missing and giving it back. That's all. Clara pressed her hand to her chest, whispering to Lila, "You're hearing now, my little girl, you're hearing." The house, once heavy with despair, was now alive with possibility. Lila's tiny hands reached toward the sound, her coos growing stronger. Mason's leather jacket felt heavy on his shoulders, not from protection but from gratitude and awe. The impossible had happened, but Toby remained calm, almost casual, as if this was all perfectly ordinary. Mason realized that courage, moral strength, and hope could come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes even a small homeless boy with a strange whistle could change everything. And in that living room, filled with trembling joy and tears, Mason understood that family, protection, and love were forces far stronger than fear or impossibility. Lila's world had changed in seconds, and so had theirs. The living room was bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp, shadows flickering along the walls as Mason held Lila close. Her tiny fingers wrapped instinctively around his thumb, a connection that had been missing for months. Toby stood nearby, his whistle still clutched carefully in his hands, watching the scene with quiet pride. Mason's voice was rough, edged with disbelief and gratitude. "Kid, you just gave my daughter something I didn't think anyone could." Toby shrugged, his eyes steady. "You didn't see what she needed. I did. That's all." Clara smiled, tears glistening on her cheeks. "It's more than that, Mason. He didn't just help her here, he gave her hope. And maybe, he's helping us too." Mason studied Toby carefully. The boy's clothes were tattered, his hair messy, yet there was something in his posture, the quiet confidence in his eyes, that spoke of resilience and courage far beyond his years. For a man who had faced countless dangers, the realization hit hard. Bravery sometimes came in small, unexpected packages. "You know," Mason said slowly, "most people would have looked at you and walked away. But you didn't." Toby's gaze met his, unwavering. "Because I know what it's like to be overlooked. To be invisible. I couldn't let that happen to her." Mason felt a lump in his throat. The bond forming between them was unexpected but undeniable, a connection rooted not in blood, but in courage, loyalty, and moral strength. Here was a boy who had nothing, yet had given everything to help someone in need. Clara placed a hand gently on Mason's shoulder. "Maybe this is what family really means. Sometimes it's who shows up when you need them the most." Mason looked at Toby, then at Lila, and nodded slowly. "You're part of this family now, kid. You saved more than her hearing, you saved something in us too." Toby's small smile was genuine, shy but proud. I just did what I had to. That's all." For the first time in months, Mason felt a peace he hadn't known since Lila's birth. The tension, the helplessness, the fear, all of it melted into a profound gratitude and respect. And in that moment, a silent promise formed between them. They would protect one another, stand together, and act with loyalty and courage whenever the world threatened the innocent. Outside, the faint hum of motorcycles could be heard as Mason's crew patrolled the streets, ready, vigilant, and loyal. And inside, a small home was filled with a sense of protection, family, and moral resolve stronger than any fear they had faced before. Lila cooed again, responding to Toby's soft whistle, and Mason realized something powerful. Courage and loyalty weren't about age, size, or status. They were about action. They were about standing for what's right, no matter what. And in this living room, a new chapter of trust, protection, and family had begun. The morning sun spilled across the quiet streets of Harlow Town, but peace was fragile. Mason knew that the outside world didn't pause for miracles, no matter how extraordinary. Threats lurked in corners, judgment waited in whispers, and danger often came wrapped in subtlety. Lila's hearing might have returned, but their battle was far from over. Mason and Toby stepped outside, the chill in the air biting against their cheeks. The motorcycles of Mason's crew rumbled softly in the distance, engines low, a steady presence in case the world dared to strike. Toby clutched the whistle, its delicate craftsmanship glinting in the early light, while Mason's eyes scanned every passerby, every shadow. Clara emerged from the house, holding Lila close. "Are you sure about this, Mason? He's just a kid, and she's still so tiny." Mason's jaw tightened, eyes never leaving the street. "That's exactly why we need to be ready. The world doesn't wait for anyone. And if we want to protect her, we act first." They walked slowly toward the diner where Mason had first met Toby. Every step was deliberate, every glance cautious. The familiar streets now felt charged with tension, each passerby a potential threat. Toby noticed it too, the subtle signs, the hurried glances, the way some people avoided their eyes. "People don't always know what they're up against," Toby said quietly. "Sometimes they don't even realize how far someone will go to protect someone else." Mason nodded. "And that's what we're about. Protection. Loyalty. Acting before it's too late." As they neared the diner, Mason noticed a figure lingering across the street. It was an older man, dressed shabbily, but his eyes followed Lila with something uncomfortably sharp. Instinctively, Mason shifted Lila closer to his chest. His crew, sensing the tension, moved to surround him, engines humming softly. Cole's voice crackled through Mason's earpiece. "Eyes on everyone. Nobody moves without our notice. Keep her close." The man took a step forward, and Mason's protective instincts ignited. He tightened his grip on Lila and whispered, "Not today. Not ever." Toby, sensing the threat, stepped forward, holding the whistle high. A soft, melodic tone filled the air, reverberating not just in Lila's ears but in the surrounding space. The man froze, confusion crossing his face. The sound was unusual, commanding, almost magnetic. Clara glanced at Mason, worry and awe mixing in her gaze. "It's like his, controlling the space around us." Mason's gaze softened on Toby. "Kid, you're more than a miracle. You're a shield." The figure hesitated, then slowly retreated, understanding that he could not breach the invisible fortress of courage, loyalty, and moral strength surrounding Lila. The bikers had turned the street itself into a barrier, a lesson that protection wasn't just walls or fences, it was action, presence, and unwavering moral resolve. As they returned home, Mason held Lila close, heart pounding with a mixture of relief and pride. She cooed, responding to Toby's gentle whistle once more. Mason realized that the true strength of protection came not just from his crew, his reputation, or his power. It came from people like Toby, from family, loyalty, courage, and moral action that could turn the impossible into reality. For Lila, the world remained uncertain, but now she faced it surrounded by guardians, by people who acted when it mattered, and by a bond that could withstand anything. Days passed, but Mason knew that peace was fragile. The world rarely allowed miracles to exist undisturbed. One afternoon, as Lila played on the living room floor, a series of distant noises reached Mason's ears, the unmistakable sound of harassment, raised voices, and the tension of danger closing in. Cole's voice crackled through Mason's earpiece. "Mason, we've got a situation. Someone's been tracking Lila. Eyes on her. Nothing overt yet, but it's getting closer." Mason's jaw tightened. "Understood. Keep everyone in position. No mistakes." He looked down at Lila, her tiny hands exploring her surroundings, cooing as Toby knelt beside her, gently guiding her fingers over the small, carved whistle. Despite the looming threat, the child's innocence and resilience radiated, a stark contrast to the shadows encroaching outside. Clara spoke softly, a tremor of worry in her voice. We can't just sit here. What if they—" Mason interrupted gently but firmly. "We don't just sit. We act. That's what family does. That's what courage looks like." The bikers began to take positions around the house. Hank and Sable stationed themselves at the entrances, eyes scanning every movement, hands ready to act. Ryder and Cole patrolled the perimeter, silent and imposing. Toby held Lila close, his small presence now strengthened by the trust of the family he had become part of. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of the driveway, tall, menacing, trying to assess the situation. Mason stepped forward, voice low and commanding. "You're not coming any closer. Back off." The figure hesitated, sensing the collective presence behind Mason. 40 bikers, silent but deadly in their coordination, had transformed the ordinary house into a fortress of protection. Loyalty, courage, and moral strength radiated from every movement, every glance. Toby, though young and small, held the whistle again. He blew softly, a sound both melodic and commanding. The man froze, eyes widening, the air charged with an unspoken authority. Mason stepped closer, voice firm. "Leave now. You're done. You can't touch her. Not today. Not ever." The man retreated slowly, realizing he was no match for a force grounded not in violence, but in loyalty, courage, and moral strength. Mason watched him disappear into the shadows and exhaled, feeling a surge of pride, not in himself, but in the unity surrounding him, in the courage displayed by Toby, and in the protection forged by those who acted when it mattered most. Clara hugged Lila, voice trembling but relieved. "She's safe. Because of all of you. Because of him, and you, Mason." Mason looked at Toby, who met his gaze calmly. "We did what we had to. That's all," the boy said simply. Mason smiled faintly, realizing the truth. Bravery and loyalty weren't about power, status, or age. They were about standing together, acting decisively, and protecting the innocent when no one else would. Lila, surrounded by love, courage, and moral strength, had a future now, a future safeguarded by extraordinary people who refused to let fear or danger prevail. The night fell over Harlow Town like a heavy curtain, shadows stretching across the streets as the wind whispered through empty alleys. Mason's instincts screamed that the danger they had faced during the day was only a prelude. Someone was determined, and their target remained Lila, the newborn girl whose life had already been touched by miracle and courage. Mason and his crew, 40 loyal bikers, had encircled the house, engines silent but ready, every pair of eyes scanning the darkness. Toby held Lila close, her small fingers gripping his shirt, the carved whistle lying ready beside him. The house, once ordinary, had become a fortress built on loyalty, courage, and moral strength. Cole stepped forward, his shadow long and commanding under the porch light. "They're testing us," he said calmly. "They'll try again. Be ready. No mistakes. Protect the girl at all costs." From the edge of the woods, a figure emerged, tall, masked, moving with calculated precision. The intruder had clearly studied their routines, but what they didn't anticipate was the unyielding coordination of men who had sworn to protect the innocent. Hank signaled to Sable and Ryder. They fanned out, covering every angle, every potential path of attack. Mason held Lila tightly, voice low but resolute. "We do this together. Nobody touches her. Not a step closer." Suddenly, the intruder lunged, a swift motion meant to intimidate. Toby, unflinching, picked up the whistle and blew a sharp, commanding tone. The sound resonated in the night, disorienting the attacker, buying precious seconds. Mason stepped forward, every movement deliberate, as 40 bikers converged silently, their presence a wall of unwavering resolve. The intruder faltered, realizing the gravity of what they were up against. The bikers did not attack recklessly, they moved with precision, guided by loyalty, moral authority, and the protection of the innocent. Every step Mason took, every glance from Cole, every hand ready to act, reinforced a simple but powerful truth. Courage and protection were strongest when bound by unity and moral conviction. Within moments, the intruder retreated, knowing the fight was impossible. The street returned to a tense calm, the night echoing only with the soft hum of engines and the quiet, relieved breathing of those inside the house. Mason exhaled, holding Lila closer. She cooed softly, responding to the whistle, her tiny eyes reflecting trust and wonder. Clara knelt beside him, voice trembling but firm. "They won't touch her now, not while we're here." Mason's gaze swept over the bikers, over Toby, over his daughter. "This is what it means to stand together. To act when it matters. Courage, loyalty, moral strength, they aren't just words. They're actions. And we just lived them. Toby looked at Mason, small but confident. It's not about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about showing up, protecting those who can't protect themselves, and never letting fear win. The night, once heavy with threat, was now filled with a quiet sense of triumph. Lila's world had been safeguarded not just by miracle, but by the extraordinary courage and moral resolve of those who refused to let evil prevail. The first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, painting the room in warm gold. Lila lay peacefully in her crib, her tiny coos now resonating clearly, a sound that had once been impossible. Mason sat beside her, exhausted but profoundly relieved, Toby leaning close, their bond unspoken but unbreakable. Clara placed a hand over Mason's shoulder, tears streaming. "She's safe. Because of you all. Because of him," she whispered, nodding at Toby. Mason looked around at his crew, their presence quiet yet formidable, every face etched with moral strength, courage, and loyalty. "You all did more than protect a child. You showed what it means to act when it matters. Not just to fight, but to shield, to care, to stand unwavering." Toby, small but proud, smiled faintly. I just wanted to help. I didn't think it would matter this much." Mason shook his head, voice soft but powerful. "It matters more than you know. You gave her the chance to hear. You gave her hope. And sometimes, that's the greatest protection of all." The house, once filled with uncertainty and fear, now hummed with quiet joy. Lila reached toward Toby, recognizing him not just as a stranger who had brought her sound, but as a protector, a friend, a part of the family. Cole stepped to Mason's side, voice low but resolute. "Remember, it's not about power or reputation. It's about courage, loyalty, and moral action. Those are the things that change lives." Mason cradled Lila close, eyes lingering on the small whistle Toby held. "We've learned something today. Protection isn't just being ready for violence, it's being ready to act, to care, to stand up for those who can't stand for themselves. That's true family. That's true courage." Outside, the engines of the motorcycles whispered softly, a reminder that the guardianship of the innocent extended beyond these walls, an ever-present force ready to act. The miracle of Lila's hearing had been extraordinary, but the true miracle was the courage, loyalty, and moral strength that had safeguarded her life and changed everyone around her. Lila cooed once more, reaching for Toby, and Mason knew that the impossible had not only been achieved, it had been lived, protected, and honored by people willing to act when it mattered most. True courage is not the absence of fear, but acting for the innocent when no one else will. Loyalty is shown through action, not words, and it can transform lives in unimaginable ways. Protection is more than walls, it is moral strength and unwavering presence. Family is chosen, nurtured, and proven through deeds of care and courage. Even the smallest acts of bravery can create miracles, safeguard hope, and change the world forever.